and thank you for having me today. I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm not exactly sure at what time in the day you're going to be watching this, but I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to spend the next half hour with you. And so my name is Mona Ederveen. I'm going to be talking to you about how to quantum transition. Let me start sharing my slides. So we'll give that some time to load. I guess you can see that now. And yeah, so once again, thank you for having me. In terms of my background, I am from Germany, and I started going to international hacking and security conferences at age 16. At 17, I first read about quantum mechanics, and I've been working at the intersection of people and technology all my life. About the last 20 odd years or so, I've been working in cybersecurity and financial services. I'm an international speaker and now work as cross-sector cyber and quantum readiness advisor. This includes for the Cambridge University. And when I designed my practical post-quantum transition framework, I took my years of risk management, security governance, and project management experience and distilled that into a manageable framework that doesn't overload teams. I actually see a lot of analysis paralysis in the industry, and I wanted to do something about that. So I'm not a quantum physicist by training. And actually, contrary to a lot of what you see online, I combined my German efficiency and risk management expertise to design a framework that makes transition manageable for cybersecurity practitioners and security leaders, not purely for cryptographers and quantum scientists. So I will walk you through that today. And what actually is post-quantum security? So as you know, the key thing we want to achieve in our transition is crypto agility. And we already have the algorithms from NIST that are deemed quantum resistant. And actually, for a while, as many of you will know, we will be living in a hybrid scenario where we're using both classical and quantum resistant encryption algorithms alongside each other. In fact, organizations like Google, Cloudflare, Akamai, and Amazon already offer hybrid encryption. But the key point to be aware of is crypto agility. That is the goal. And then what we also especially need to secure is our cryptographic key exchange, as it's the very keys that are targeted by attackers. And to achieve this, I've developed the practical post-quantum transition framework. Here you can see the overview, where we start with a brief initiation phase and then lay the protective foundations, for example, by enhancing data lifecycle management. Phase 2 is actually the most complex. That's where you're saying, well, this is a marathon and not a sprint, and naturally takes the longest. Phase 3, by contrast, has no end date because it's a continuous improvement overlay, which also means it can only start during the second phase, as soon as we have something to improve or test. Now here's another view of the framework, and it's showing you how the phases overlap and repeat. This is definitely not a waterfall project. But I've structured it so that the activities don't all have to run at the same time, which would take a larger team and more resource than is generally practical. Basically, I wanted to avoid overloading teams with complexity. And here's a view of some sample timelines, right? Especially if we have smaller teams, or if we have, let's say, less resource, we just chunk the tasks. We don't boil the ocean. And yes, these are actually long timelines, but at least phase 1A can be very short, like a mere couple of months. And if you wanted to, you can start that this week. In fact, you probably should. And I'm now going to walk you through a number of key activities in phase 1A. None of these actually require deep technical knowledge, but what you start with is a quantum risk assessment in terms of where is your crown jewel data and your crown jewel system. That's where you're facing the biggest threat. And then you want to garner buy-in, and that gets easier if you can show that initial post-quantum preparedness actions immediately improve your risk posture. That also includes against threats usually considered more current by those not as in the know, like for example, ransomware. And the data lifecycle management then helps you with ransomware recovery, for example, GDPR compliance and incident response. So that is from day one, because you're reducing data retention, and that reduces the attack surface. Zero trust architecture, as we'll see, also helps against AI-enabled attacks. And of course, for effective data governance, you need a cross-functional authority, not just an IT committee. And I reckon all of us here know actually how hard data management is, or we would have done this a long time ago. But right now, post-quantum preparedness is a good reason to go beyond just IT, cover all stakeholder departments, including legal, and we can achieve a lot with just solid project management and risk management skills. Those are skills you already have. And that means you're not starting from zero. You are applying existing skills to a new threat. And here's a look at how government guidance and regulation is converging. They're all inviting us or encouraging us to be ready between now and 2035, the latest. What that means is post-quantum transition is certainly not optional in the long run, because, when do regulators ever front-run a risk? They're notoriously late. They follow evidence and move cautiously. The fact that they are acting now before a cryptographically relevant quantum computer exists is itself a signal worth considering. And of course, you will be aware that Q-Day doesn't even ultimately require a general quantum computer, just a purpose-built cryptanalytic machine. And whilst we do not know the exact timeline of that arrival, regulators are all moving, and as you see here, the timelines are converging. Now, interestingly, if you've been following the news, as I'm sure you have, Google just this week, the week that I'm recording this, set a 2029 internal deadline for its post-quantum cryptography migration. And that is, of course, well ahead of the National Cybersecurity Centre, the UK National Cybersecurity Centre deadline of 2035. So, because Google actually builds these quantum computers, if they set that as their migration deadline, then that gap is a very important data point indeed. They explicitly cited faster than expected advances in quantum computing, error correction, and factoring estimates as the reason for pulling the timeline forward. Cloudflare announced just yesterday that it is also targeting 2029 for full post-quantum security across its entire platform, including authentication systems. They were citing the Google and Oratomic research and those breakthroughs as the trigger. IBM, on the other hand, has also separately stated that quantum attacks are now a realistic possibility as early as 2029. So what are we seeing? We're seeing industry convergence, and that signal always deserves serious attention. But yeah, back to the framework. What do we need to do and how do we do it? Well, we want to expand our defensive foundation. So we need to start migration and integrating new technology. So we're getting more technical, and we do need help from the specialists in our teams for this phase. For example, to inventory our cryptographic infrastructure. But the key activities here are, first of all, embedding crypto agility in all new systems from day one. Then 2, undertaking comprehensive cryptographic inventory, even though a lot of literature says to do this day one. But in my framework, we turn things around by reducing the attack surface first, which means less cryptographic inventory to do. And number 3 is we're deploying hybrid and post-quantum and traditional key exchange for critical systems, because key exchange security protects against harvest now, decrypt later, and trust now, forge later attacks that are happening right now. Interestingly, key exchange is one of the less complex pieces to secure in the entire journey, because it's a more defined place to start and also protects your current data communications. Now, the key encapsulation mechanism already defined by NIST as ML-CAM. And number 4 is we're commencing the phased replacement of core infrastructure. There will be multiple rounds of that. And in number 5, we're engaging proactively with supply chain and vendors, and we're letting them do some of the work. And number 6, of course, we want to be tracking standards bodies and regulatory developments. So this doesn't have to happen consecutively. A lot of this work will overlap, but I have chunked it so that it's more manageable for small teams who don't want to get overloaded and overwhelmed. So what is important here? Yeah, you're not boiling the ocean, you're working risk-based. Whenever possible, I advise to use planned refresh cycles to embed crypto agility. That allows you to stay flexible and deal with the changing threat landscape and regulatory demands. I'm not going to speak much about phase 3 today. As I've already said, that can only start during phase 2 and needs active progress to have been made. But for us to be able to start improving and testing what we have to be progress through phase 2 meaningfully. And yeah, so the beautiful part is that we have 2 manageable activities that help everyone immediately, right? I call that the 2 universal wins. The first one is better data hygiene, which improves ransomware recovery and prioritization for post-quantum security. And then the secure key exchange, like I said, protects against current and more future threats. And again, I want to invite you to talk to your vendors as well and rope them into the task. You don't have to go all of this alone. But in essence, you're not just preparing for quantum, you are improving security today, and that usually helps with the business case. Now, there are several things you can do once you're back at the office, depending on where you are now in your transition journey and what category of urgency your organization is in. So I also talk about that in my framework, where you can use that to determine which category of urgency your specific industry is in. But basically what we can assume is that compliance costs will rise as deadlines approach. Early movers also face less disruption. And if that's not enough, you can actually quantify the cost of not acting. And then, like I said, with the framework, you can also demonstrate security wins from day one. That should help your business case for any board to actually start acting. And I also wanted to try to address, AI threats, which some of you may feel are still more urgent than post-quantum preparedness. But thankfully, a lot of post-quantum preparedness also addresses these AI-enabled threats. Here's several examples, but we do need to be realistic. With the advances of LLM capabilities, detection-based defenses, such as behavioral analytics, are always going to be in an arms race with AI capabilities. So it's kind of like the cat and mouse game we play with attackers today. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. But security first. We must build systems that are structurally harder to penetrate and traverse, not systems that promise to outsmart every future adversary. But here are some examples. So, certain post-quantum cryptography preparedness measures genuinely protect against AI-enhanced threats, even though they're in an arms race. And the first one here is the zero trust, which removes the trusted insider assumption entirely. It doesn't try to outsmart AI behavior mimicry. It forces continuous authentication at every access point. This is where architecture beats intelligence. And then, of course, crypto agility prevents AI from optimizing attacks against known cryptographic implementations. Rapid algorithm rotation means the adversary must constantly relearn our defenses rather than perfecting attacks against static systems. And multi-factor authentication process controls resist AI-generated impersonation attempts because they rely on multiple verification methods, not pattern recognition. So these process controls can resist AI-generated impersonation because they rely on multiple methods. And that is the type of quantum-ready infrastructure that we're building with built-in resilience constraints, and that constrains what adaptive AI attacks can achieve through redundancy and diversity. And here we can also see where preparedness delivers even more defensive advantage, right? The key is, if data is genuinely destroyed through cryptographic erasure rather than just deleted, and AI cannot harvest it later, we physically remove the asset entirely, regardless of adversary sophistication. And network segmentation also comes up regularly. It creates physical and logical barriers. Where an AI might be brilliant at impersonation, it still cannot traverse networks it has no route to. So we're constraining lateral movement independent of impersonation. But like I said, there will always be an arms race, at least that's what I assume. And we can't claim that defender pattern recognition will consistently outperform adversarial pattern recognition. But the architectural controls that we embed with our quantum preparedness delivers immediate ROI against these types of current AI-enabled threats. Right, so the hard part, how do we actually transform? Well, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and a lot of us are probably very excited about the quantum algorithms, the resistant ones, but the reality is that post-quantum preparedness is years of systematic infrastructure and process replacement. So think TLS 1.2 to 1.3 transition complexity, but bigger. However, we have to start somewhere, and we start with embedding agility by design. Then we monitor the standards, because as the technology evolves, now we've seen the 2029 announcements, well, you can be sure that regulation is due to follow. And also, we break these important tasks into key phases, so we're not overloading the teams. Even though if you wanted to, a lot of the steps could be done from day one if you had that type of resource. And then we're needing to address our supply chain as well, because if vendors and partners aren't aligned, then we can have the best quantum resistance in the world. We're not operating in a vacuum. But the organizations that start planning now are able to execute smoothly. It's the ones that wait that will be scrambling. So, yeah, if this is making some of you break out in hives, I get it, but they do say that laughter is good for relaxation, so I'm just gonna say it. A quantum physicist walks into a bar. Or does he? That's the uncertainty principle for you. Either way, whilst many others, as you know, are debating timelines of when year to quantum is here, smart organizations are already capturing value. And I always love talking about the opportunity as well. Because, for example, Barclays isn't just quantum ready. They've eliminated vendor lock-in and reduced costs. HSBC isn't just defending, they're using quantum for competitive advantage. And so is MasterCard. The early movers are pulling ahead. And here's how you might sell post-quantum preparedness to the board. It's not just a cost center, it's a strategic investment that pays dividends immediately. Better data governance, stronger defenses, competitive differentiation. The quantum benefits are just the bonus to improving today's posture and responding to current issues such as AI. And if you needed a personalized roadmap, this could be it, right? If you're in a high-risk organization with long transition timelines, very long data secrecy requirements, you should absolutely be in implementation mode now. If you're sort of medium data secrecy requirements and medium complexity, then you should be in strategic planning mode. That's probably everyone, at least. And if you're really low risk, well, you're very lucky, but you should still be in preparation mode. And everyone needs to have a board conversation and to start doing something. We need to start getting the awareness everywhere. Right, and some people ask me, what is the economic impact of what the quantum threat actually is? So what I can tell you here is that a study by the Hudson Institute of a theoretical quantum attack on the US RTGS, the real-time gross settlement Fedwire system, projected a 10 to 17% decline in real GDP following the attack, which could then trigger a recession and a 2 to 3 trillion US dollars in indirect losses. And why is that? It is because the systemic risk of interconnected financial institutions means that a compromise of the RTG system or similar systems could easily cascade. One thing we haven't talked about today yet is quantum key distribution. So that is definitely also one of those that delivers benefits from day one, because it can secure recurrent communication channels against interception by leveraging physics rather than mathematical complexity. So that provides security against both classical and quantum attacks. I also like to, mention this visual, because if we're going really visual on the impact of the quantum threat, not just financially, but also reputationally and, in terms of data secrecy, think about the combined negative impact and the scale of the Epstein files, Panama Papers, WikiLeaks, and the Ashley Madison breach. Then multiply that exposure across every sector simultaneously. That's the threat landscape we're discussing. Right, in summary then, what we covered today as key messages is the harvest now, decrypt later, and the trust now, forge later threat is real. Transition takes time, and doing nothing is not an option. Making meaningful progress is not as hard as it might seem at the outset. You can make progress as part of ongoing remedial and refresh work with skills we have in-house. My framework will help you with that. And this doesn't even require huge outlays at the start. I mean, a data governance body and data cleanup, this can be done as part of your normal remediation work. That means the business case writes itself when you can show that post-quantum preparedness brings an immediate ROI in terms of your security posture on other, also currently pressing key threats. I would absolutely advise against emergency procurement and vendor lock-in from day one, because there are too many as yet proven solutions out there. But this is something I'm looking at with my Quantum Security Connection Intelligence Report. So yeah, watch this space. And last but not least, this one's close to my heart. We're stronger together. And with a wicked problem like post-quantum cryptography migration, leaning on a community can only help lift all boats. So that's also why I'm running the Quantum Security Connection, which is a session or a series of events, including tabletop exercises, etc. But yeah, when I say community, I also mean please work with your vendors and public-private partnerships. Right, so my framework is available for free on my website, and I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn if you can. You know, I'm always happy to organize a quantum security connection or a tabletop exercise in your area or for your sector. Do let me know. Reach out if you want to join my Quantum Women group, because I think diversity in this space is really important. And yeah, if you need any board briefings, etc., do let me know. And I'm just realizing the LinkedIn URL has changed. They now have a LinkedIn/in/m_Ederveen for the name. But yeah, now all that rests me is to thank you very much and wish you a wonderful rest of your day.